which masters most of the present top technologies. Therefore, as Mr. Lai was saying, if you are looking for technology, you know that you have the French option. Second, France is a big market. 65 million people. In European terms, it is the second largest country, and the demographics are very, very dynamic. Therefore, you know that in the medium term, the French prospect is good because the demographics are good.
I want to ask you one more question, which is top of the mind, of course, is the Eurozone crisis. Now, is this a time which a businessman or entrepreneur would see as a good time to invest in France or Europe? Ankur?
Definitely. I think because of the Eurozone crisis and where we are, I think the Euro has become much more attractive to Indian business. And it is a great time to invest and basically set up a base, because when you are investing, when you are creating something new, each euro is very, very precious. And if you could probably invest 15% more, or you could create a 15% larger pool today, which you were not able to do last year, I think it's going to make a
So the cost of operations would actually be lower. Is that a fair point?
Well, you know, first of all, the lesson of this crisis is that the euro is strong enough to resist attacks. And the second lesson of this crisis is that we, as European governments, are doing our homework, and in two ways. Number one, we are all now putting in place reform programs in order to spend less as part of public spendings, and number two, at the same time, we are consolidating the Eurozone governance. And I think that the paradoxical benefit of this painful crisis will be a stronger euro tomorrow. And I think that what Indian investors have to realize is the depth of the political commitments of governments in Europe when it comes to the euro. It is definitely a major European achievement, and not only are we not going to let it down, but we are going to make sure that it will continue to be one of the best assets of attractivity of Europe worldwide.
And with the new acquisition being PE accretive, whatever visibility you see on the top line growth and the bottom line growth shifts automatically into price.
Which actually means we are wondering whether the company can continue to grow so fast and how much will it give back to its investors.
The question is, were there to be a realistic assessment of real estate as an asset class, will the current price momentum hold?
In simple words, how much money could one make by investing in property right now?
Most importantly, the derivative markets indicate that the open interest rollover for the near-month series in the Nifty is the highest at 5100, and therefore it's theta depletive and low on beta.
That's really simple. Most traders are predicting that Nifty will cross 5100 next month. So stay invested and have a good night's sleep.
I have a BlackBerry. I've got the iPad 3G. I have a Canon Mark II 5D. I've just got a pair of Genelec. I've got a DLP projector. M79 for a voice blog.
In association with Intel, introducing all new 2010 Intel Core processor family, not just faster, smarter.
IPO. When a company issues its common stocks or shares to the public for the first time, it makes an initial public offering. That's IPO. What does it mean for you? Small companies looking to expand issue IPOs to raise capital. Privately owned companies do it to make publicly traded. The downside, you cannot predict how the company stock will perform, as there is no historical data to study its performance.
I used to get very worried because every month we are making 3-4 crore losses. When it's really, really pouring, you can't imagine that there's going to be sunshine. But things change.
In association with AMW, the global truck built to win.
Imagine if you invested in Reliance when it was a mid-cap, or a promising Infosys in 1993, perhaps few Wipro mid-cap shares in 1990. Learn to spot opportunities early as our experts pick the best mid-caps on Top Mid-Cap Picks. Weekdays at 9:30 a.m. only on Bloomberg-UTV.
बोलो बोलो BSC बोलो निफ्टी बोलो इंफ्रा बोलो बोलो ऑटो ऑटो धंधे का टाइम है बॉस. ऊपर बोलो नीचे बोलो फार्मा बोलो स्टील बोलो पावर बोलो एविएशन बोलो बॉस भाव चढ़ रहा है बोलो बोलो जल्दी बोलो गया ऊपर गया अरे गिरा.
Don't get hustled while investing. Find out what the market insiders are betting big on. Satte Pe Satta. Weekdays at 7:30 a.m. only on Bloomberg-UTV.
One of the factors which have been driving business and cross-country business is the linkages in education. What are the efforts which French government is doing with the Indian government to ensure there is better flow of student and education?
Very valid point. On the one side, more and more French students are coming to India for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months periods. And I'm always very, very pleasantly surprised when I meet in IITs or IIMs or universities like DU, GNU, etc., more and more French students who come for a semester or two in order to have a glimpse of India and to understand what is going on in India. Very interesting phenomenon, because it means that now India is in the mental framework of the French. On the other hand, we have approximately 2,000 Indian students in France every year, vis-à-vis 25,000 Chinese and 250,000 foreign students in France. 2,000, 25,000, 250,000. Clearly, there is something wrong here, and we are making a definite effort to attract more Indian students. Again, we have made a reform of the visa system. We try to multiply agreements from university to university. And since Indians are particularly attracted to our business schools and engineering schools, we have a network of our engineering schools which is working with IITs in particular, and a network of our business schools which are working with the IIMs in particular. But there are so many other choices possible, and my goal, which in fact is the result of a political decision of our two governments, is to double in the next few years the number of Indian students coming to study in France.
Ankur, is that something which will be driving Indian companies to go to France, because then you have a talent pool which is familiar with France, they know technology, they know business, and they know France. What else do you need?
Absolutely. I think I have a lot of friends from IIT all over the world. I go to all these countries and I have a lot of friends. When I go to France, I don't find them. So I think that's a big opportunity to be accessed to. We have to get these people into France. I would love to have many more people from India in France. And I think education is the way to do it, because that's the time you get the cultural learnings, you get to know the country, you know how the system works.
We have to come to an end of this discussion, but before we close, sir, I would like to ask you, in the last 3 or 4 years, a lot of Indian companies have gone to France. What is the feedback you've got in their experience of doing business in France?
The feedback I get, and I will be very sincere with you, is that the longer it goes, the better it is. Which means that in the beginning, they always discover, and so it's an adaptation period. Very often they come with questions, difficulties, complexities, and then as soon as the cultural click is done, it's going very fast and very smoothly.
And Invest in France agency, it is bringing a lot of partners for Indian companies as well. What have been the efforts on that front, and have those partnerships done well?
Well, as far as I am aware, a couple of success stories have been produced, which we are trying to advertise, and Invest in France is doing it, including in one section on which we did not have time to talk, which is the labor market. Because it's a question which is often asked by Indian companies: are we going to enjoy a labor market which will be accommodative? And here also, they learn that the reforms we have made make it possible to adjust your business to your needs. It is not as immediate as in the US, because we are not the same system as the US system, but there is very high level of labor productivity.
Uncle, labor issues, how critical are these for not just IT but other industries?
I think labor issues is very critical, and that is a top of mind recall for any business wanting to establish there or expand there. And I think, as the ambassador said, there is a framework, there's an established framework, which we haven't got used to working with, which needs to improve, which needs to become more easy to work with. So I think, like some of the distance has been traveled in terms of reforms by France, the Indian businesses need to learn how to work with it. At the same time, I think IFA and other institutions need to make it uniform. So while some of the people can get a 2-year visa, some people can still get a 3-month visa. So that should get simplified.
No,
the labor market
should
get
restrictions on who to employ, who not to employ. Do you have to have local employment? Those are the questions that you have. Also, the kind of rules you have of minimum hours to work. You cannot work beyond a certain hour. There are a set of minimum wages which have to be provided. Is that a deterrent?
I think that's a deterrent, but that has to be taken as a part of cost of business. So if you can only have a person work 35 hours, whereas people in India are used to working 70 hours or 65 hours, that is something we will have to take it as a part of cost of doing business in France.
It is a little bit more nuanced. Number one, when we do the productivity per laborer studies, comparative studies, we have number one the US, number two Norway, and number three France. So France is on top of the European Union when it comes to labor productivity. Number two, when it comes to number of hours worked per week. It is true that we have a theoretical limit of 35 hours a week. But as a matter of fact, the weekly average in France is above the European average because you have the possibility to adjust. And for laborers and employees, it is somewhere around 40. And for executive and high executive, it is somewhere between 45, 48 and above. So there is what the minimal is, and there is what the company negotiates with its employees and its people. So the growth prospect in France, despite what people say about rigidity, the growth prospect is quite high, and it will be, I think, even better thanks to the reforms that we are implementing.
So do I see a lot of Indian companies now going to France, Ankur?
I wish, yes, absolutely. I think with these reforms happening, more and more companies should look at going to France. And I think the barriers to entry are reducing. So,
but as you said in the beginning, it's really the articulation and to talk about the changes and tackle the perception, which is critical now.
The perception is very critical, and getting uniform service to the companies is very critical. So I think that needs to happen. And I think the overall system is very strong. So I think that's a very positive point. And it is very recession-proof. It is very sturdy. Once you get in there, you have longer commitment. So I think there are a lot of positives there.
Thank you. On that note, we have to, you wanted to say something, sir?
Thank you for this program, which is part of the awareness-making process.
Thank you very much, sir, for joining us, and thanks, Uncle, for this really interesting discussion. And we hope that far more Indian companies would be establishing base in France and strengthening the linkages between the countries.
They are most welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.